Hola clase, hoy vamos a hablar sobre verbos irregulares. So hello class, today we're going to be speaking about irregular verbs. There's a lot of these in Spanish, and although you just learned the pattern for regular verbs, it's important to also be able to identify which verbs are irregular and to be able to conjugate them. Here, one of the most common that we are going to see, it is caer. So as you can see, caer means to fall, and as you learned in a previous lesson, since it ends in er, it is an er verb. However, in the first person singular, you are going to have to memorize the word caigo because it does not follow the regular pattern for er verbs. As you can see here, all of its other forms do follow the regular er verb pattern. Here is the verb hacer, to make or to do. Again, you're going to have to learn the word for hago, I make or I do, first person singular, because it does not follow the typical er verb pattern. Poner means put. First person singular is pongo. I put the tail on the donkey. Pongo la cola en el burro. Dar means to give. First person singular of dar is doy. Doy el regalo. I give the gift. Salir means to leave or to go out. First person singular is salgo. As you can see, this is an IR verb, so all of the other forms follow the typical IR verb pattern. Traer, an ER verb, everything follows the ER pattern except for the first person singular, which is traigo. Ver, an ER verb, it follows the pattern except for the first person singular, veo. So if this was a regular verb, what would the first person singular be? You would take the V, which is the base of the word, and add an O. It would be vo. But for pronunciation reasons, Spanish changes that to veo. All right, so those were some typical irregular verbs. Now let's get into some stem changing verbs. So for stem changing verbs, it gets a little bit trickier. So what is a stem changing verb? As we learned earlier, we already know that in order to begin to conjugate, we need to think about a verb's infinitive. So from the infinitive, we look at whether it's an AR, an ER, or an IR verb. So that is the infinitive ending. The other part of that word that is not the AR, the ER, or the IR is the stem. So in the example of hablar, the stem would be HABL, and the infinitive is AR. So thinking about the stems of verbs, there are three different ways that stems might change in Spanish. We have some verbs that change the stem's vowel of an E to an IE. We have some verbs that change a stem's vowel, which includes an O, to a UE. And some verbs change the E to an I. And as you will see, this typically occurs in all forms except for the nosotros form. So let's do some examples so that you can visualize this. Here's a list of stem changing verbs that go from E to IE. So as you can see in all of these verbs, in the stem of the verb, there is a vowel that is an E. So in the word atender, the E is going to change to an IE. Cerrar, the E will change to an IE. Let's take a look. Here's our example of cerrar, to close, E to IE. So typically, if you were following an AR pattern, you would think that the first person singular would be cerro. But in Spanish, because this is a stem changing verb, we're changing the E to an IE, cierro. As you can see, this occurs in all of the forms except for the nosotros form. So in the nosotros form, we keep the same stem of CERR, cerramos. Here are some verbs that do a stem change from O to UE. As you can see in the list, all of these verbs have an O in their stem. So the O of almorzar will change to a UE in all of its forms except for the nosotros form. Let's look at this. Almorzar, which means to eat lunch. It's an O to UE stem changing verb. So in the first person singular, we never say almuerzo, we say almuerzo. The O turns into a UE. Please note again that in the nosotros form, the stem does not change. It is almorzamos. Okay, the third type of stem changing verb is when the stem starts as an E and it gets changed to an I. So here are some examples. Conseguir, pedir, seguir, servir. As you can see, there's an E in the stem and it will change to an I. Just one quick note, in seguir and conseguir, there's an extra irregularity. In the first person singular, it is not sigo with a U, we do S-I-G-O. And for conseguir, consigo, there is an S-I-G-O. We drop the U in the infinitive just for the sake of pronunciation. So it's a little irregular thing you have to memorize on top of it being an irregular verb. So let's look at servir. Yo sirvo. The E in servir in the infinitive changes to an I. So the stem change is from an E to an I. Again, in the nosotros form, the stem does not change. One thing to note here, sometimes in Spanish class, people will refer to these stem changing verbs as shoe verbs. If you think about this verb chart, everything on the left plus the bottom right, if you put it together, it forms the shape of a shoe. So sirvo, sirve, sirve, and sirven, if you were to draw a circle around them, it almost looks like a shoe. So you're excluding the nosotros form. A few more oddballs that you will just have to memorize. I'm very sorry, but these are a little bit tricky. We're going to go through them one by one. Oír means to hear. This is a little bit difficult, so you would just have to memorize its different forms and practice it as much as you can by using these in sentences. Oigo, oyes, oye, oímos, oyen. Decir means to say or to tell. Digo, dices, dice, decimos, dice. Reír, to laugh. Note that there's a lot of accent marks in this one that you have to memorize. Río, ríes, ríe, reímos, ríen. Sonreír. Sonrío, sonríe, sonríe, sonríamos, sonríen. This is one that you're going to use a lot in Spanish. It is very irregular, but we're going to need it a lot. So please memorize this one. Voy, vas, va, vamos, van. That is how you say to go in Spanish. And the infinitive is ir, which looks nothing like its forms in the present tense. Okay, thank you so much for sticking with me through these irregular verbs. I know that they are tricky. A lot of them look very strange, but once you start using them and practicing them, it will become second nature eventually. Gracias.